Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Area 51.
Hey guys, it's been some time since we spoke to you guys last. We hope you guys enjoyed the last episode, listening to Heyman's journey from an F1 student to multiple different visa classes to finally succeeding and getting that YC backing and his O1 visa and his successful startup. I think it was very inspiring for everyone here. And I know that on an H1B, when you're here, you kind of feel stuck. I feel stuck. A lot of us do feel stuck because of the fact that you're kind of restricted in the amount of activities that you can do. Has to be a day job, no side hustles, nothing of that sort.
Or are you allowed to? Or is there a plan? And maybe that's what we are trying to pivot to in our episode today.
What a nice segue.
And with the idea being that, with the new regulations that's come up on the Federal Register for some changes on the H1B visa, where the federal government has plans to modernize it for the new age. We also have somebody who's an expert on this stuff and who's also a fan of our podcast and our Twitter channels. Hey, Stephen.
Hey, how you guys doing today?
Welcome to the show, man.
It's pretty awesome to have somebody. When we reached out to you originally, you said, hey, you're a fan of our show. And like, oh, wow, that's nice to hear somebody say that when you're trying to, pitch you the show to bring you on as a guest.
No, I love it. Just the way you guys bring some information and just, kind of keep it casual. It's kind of how I like to do things. It's not too uptight on things and keep it a little fun.
Yep.
You know that meme that was floating around where there's this dog that's standing, the entire room's on fire. And the dog's like, this is fine. This is okay. That's kind of the model we try to implement when we talk about these things on the podcast. This is fine. Yeah.
Yep.
Might get deported soon.
Yep. And so for our listeners, Stephen is an immigration attorney with the Reddy Neumann Group in Houston. And Stephen's very active on Twitter. And we follow a lot of his content and some of the webinars that the Reddy Neumann Group put about, educating everyone on how the immigration system in the US works, especially on visa updates, the visa bulletins, all of that stuff. So, Stephen, we are very excited to have you on the show and hoping to have some fun along the way.
Yeah, excited to be here. Thanks, guys.
And fun fact about Stephen, guys, he's got a cool collection of law and immigration-related T-shirts and sweatshirts. So if you bump into him, you probably might see some of them on, and it's pretty cool. We saw one yesterday.
Some of them my wife isn't as big of a fan of. I bought her one that had the single taken and then married to an awesome immigration attorney, and she hadn't worn it. She hadn't worn it yet.
And yeah, Stephen, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit about your background to our listeners, we could get in.
Yeah, so, as the guys mentioned, I'm Stephen Brown. I'm a partner at Reddy Neumann PC here in Houston, Texas. Our firm's been in operation for over 25 years, predominantly working with employment-based immigration. I always tell people we do some family-based on the side, but it's usually, our focus is primarily on employment-based. I manage our firm's non-immigrant visa practice, so H, Ls, TNs, F1s, Os, all that fun stuff. Get into a little bit of EB1, C, especially because it's kind of a derivative of the L1. And then I manage our firm's litigation practice, delays, denials. The fun federal court stuff that was, especially during the Trump administration, problematic, but a little bit better now, thankfully.
Every time you said fun, I was kind of waiting to see you use the imaginary air quotes.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely a little bit of sarcasm there, with some of the fun lawsuits that we've had to unfortunately bring with USCIS.
Wow.
I mean, it seems today firms like yours are pretty much litigating their way to immigration reform rather than getting any sort of actual immigration form passed through Congress. So thank you for, what you do.
Yeah, no, and some of it's just, you look at one of the things, and I know you guys had John Wanston on, but John and I did, I don't know what, it's been a year or two, was the L2s, and that Congress had already spoken to the work authorization incident to status for L2. So let's, hold the agency accountable for what they should be doing. Okay. And not just making things up as they go.
You said it in a lighter vein, Sanjay, but it's actually pretty damn important to us. I mean, the fact that there are firms like yourself that are able to stand up and support and actually win cases for immigrants, and that brings about immigration reform. I think, let's face it, right? If that wasn't there, that a lot of reform that we've seen would not have happened. So it's actually extremely important to us, and we're grateful for that.
I appreciate it. Still hopeful one day Congress is going to modernize, but we'll get there.
I think in another 50 years or so, maybe we might see that. I'm a little too pessimistic on that, but hoping we can educate people, over this episode on things you can do while you are part of this fun system, and maybe get your thoughts and opinions on a lot of new updates that have come out recently with regards to immigration in the US.
Surprising, right? I mean, to see the proposed list of amendments to the program, my first thought was, wow. I think the last time was in like 60s or something when they actually had a major change or update. So immigration bill passed, and then suddenly you're like 10 to 15 points and you're like, holy shit.
Yeah. I feel like I've been hearing about this modernizing of the H1B program for years, right? We're going to get it. Yeah. And, finally it drops on us a little over a month ago, 700 pages of proposed regulation.
Yep.
But yeah, so, I mean, there's some good, there's some bad, and we'll see what comes about when, they get the comments in and then they come up with the final rule.
I'll start with my favorite, okay? This is what I felt was the most positive outcome. And a lot of people have been complaining about this too. Multiple entries.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Clamping down on multiple entries. I feel personally that's a big win if it gets implemented.
So, I was pretty impressed with the way USCIS came up with this proposal, because I think it did two things. It cuts down on the potential for these fraudulent entries in the H-1B lottery. I'll pay you $10 to do my registration, or there are companies who are out there, they'll take $200, right? Whatever, to put someone in the H-1B lottery just to get their name in. And, they'll do it 10 times, whatever. But there needs to be a balance too, because you're going to have some individuals, and obviously not the majority of the, 750,000 that were in this last year, that have, a job offer from an Amazon, a Facebook, a Meta. And so you have to balance that. So this new proposal is kind of interesting because it's still going to allow that, multiple registrations, but you still only get one ping pong ball in the lottery. And so you get selected, all the employers that did your registration for you get notified. Now you as the employee, go negotiate, find the best job out there and take it. Like you said, Rahul, the positive here is they aren't going to incentivize, I've got 100 entries and now I've got better odds than someone who has one. Now everybody's got the same chances. I was pretty impressed with the way they were able to balance that.
I also felt that it was a power shift between giving unlimited power to an employer to kind of leveling the playing field. Right now, one of the big complaints a lot of people have with this program is that once you're tied to an H-1B to a company, you've got pretty much climb mountains to change your jobs or get promotions if it's related to a green card or whatever it is, right? But in this case, if you've got, like you said, you're like 5 different companies have filed for you, you've got picked. The employee has the opportunity to say, you know what? What's the best offer? Or what's the best potential for growth? And then kind of shifts the power to the person. Rightfully, it's supposed to be like that.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting because there's been a lot of people that have been pushing for, hey, let beneficiaries do their registration. And, unfortunately, with the way the Immigration and Nationality Act is set up, everything is done where essentially the employee is not a party to the H-1B, right? They can't submit anything on their behalf. They can't do anything. So, how do they work around this to empower the employee a little bit? And I think this is great. Now I could go ahead and say, hey, I got a job offer from A and B. What's best for me?
Yep.
And go figure that out. And like I said, but at the same time, it cuts down on the, I should be a bad actor in this system because I have no benefit for it anymore. I'm going to only get one entry regardless.
Yep.
It was always very interesting, Sanjay. All these chat forums on Reddit and on Facebook and everything. Right after the lottery results are announced, there's always 1 or 2 people like, I got picked 6 times. What do I do with this now? And then
and there's like outrage.
Like 500 comments are like, oh, you're going to rot in hell. I hope you never succeed in life. The pain and the frustration it's on those comments, like you can literally feel it. And my first thought when I read this was like, I won't get to read any more of those anymore.
There's a little bit of sadism in that, Rahul. You find joy in other people's misery.
And a lot of times, it's just people trying to get a reaction out of other people.
Yeah,
It's just like, just want to see what I'll see. I got picked 15 times, and there's some guy who's on his 6th attempt on day 1 CPT who will spend like some $50,000 on degrees that he doesn't need. He's like, I hate my life.
Right. Yeah. I saw some of those on Reddit. People were sending them. I'd see them on Twitter. And, you feel bad for those folks that are like, I've tried so many times. So I like this. It creates an even playing field, but also, like you say, it empowers the employee, which is great. Let's do that. The more we can do to kind of let employees have some power, right, in this H-1B context would be great.
Yeah. And another thing, like that's what we originally were talking about, is the fact that they are going to make provisions for folks to start their own companies on the H-1B.
Yeah, so big fan. We'll see how this comes about. Remember, we got to get through notice and comment and their final rule. And I'm sure U.S. tech workers is going to sue on something because it's pro-immigration.
I love the way you put that.
So they'll find something. But, so this is interesting right now because if I start a company, they're going to say, hey, you're not really doing a specialty occupation job because running a company doesn't require a degree in a specific field, right? I can have a degree in business. I can have a degree in math, whatever. I'm going to create my own company.
Yeah.
Now what the focus is going to be with this proposed regulation is, do you spend a majority of your time doing a specialty occupation job, and then you can spend the rest of your time managing the business? So spend 49% of your time managing the business and 51% doing the specialty occupation job of, developing a software or, being a physical therapist or whatever. That's going to be interesting because, I think we see there's so many people that we see it all the time. Oh, I want to start a business. I've got this great idea. Sorry, like you're on H-1B, you can't. The U.S. is losing out on people like that are wanting to be entrepreneurs. And look, businesses can be successful or they fail, but give people the shot.
Yeah. So the way it's worded, does that mean that, for example, tomorrow, if there's 2 folks who want to start a business, they can just file it, get that incorporated, and file for H-1B themselves?
A couple of dudes who are running a podcast and,
So I'm really curious on what they're going to do, because I imagine, some of the comments that they're going to get are, well, how do we know these are real companies? Well, how do you know any company is really doing anything? But obviously, I think they're going to try to create safeguards of, well, I'm just going to create a company. I'm in my 60-day grace period. I'm just going to create a company and do it.
Okay.
But I think what you're going to find is that there are people that they want to start a podcast, start a YouTube channel, start their own software company, do their own engineering, whatever. And they're being held back right now. And they're saying, remember, this is only going to be in the proposed rule. I think they're only going to get, 18-month approval for the first one.
Yep. And then 3 years after that.
Yeah, so they're going to try to have ways to check this. And is it legitimate and all that? So we'll see. I like it that they're going to allow this running of a business as an H-1B beneficiary. That's good.
Well, I'm glad at least there's actually a conversation that started around that. Like, hey, we need to start thinking about folks being able to start companies on H1B, because this is like so overdue other than the whole multiple entry thing. So I take that, like Rahul said, like it's a net win where, okay, we have gotten the conversation finally to start going that, okay, we need to do something about this.
Because whether we like it or not, there is a huge brain drain happening from America to Canada.
Yeah, no, Canada is like super capitalizing on everything America's doing to like mess up immigration.
They're just looking like this. They're like, oh, okay, they're not valuing H-1B. Let's get 10,000 of them online. And open work permits, they can literally come, they can start their own companies. They can do it on a work permit. You don't have to go through any ridiculous amount of H-1B lotteries or green cards or anything to do something like that. So there's a lot of folks, friends of mine, myself, who've actually been bitten by that entrepreneurial bug and just say, hey, you know what, Canada's got better options, let me go there. And they're doing great. And I keep thinking if US had actually capitalized on that here, they just lost out on some great opportunities.
Well, when you think about it, Canada was doing more even prior to 2020, but with COVID and remote work, more people are okay moving to Canada because they could go work on the same time zone and all that. And so Canada is capitalizing. You said that 10,000 person program they got snapped up like very quickly. And, Canada's going to take advantage of everywhere that the US is failing high-skilled immigrants.
True story, Steven. I started applying for that permit from my friend in the morning.
Oh, yeah?
And we reached halfway, 50%, right? And then we were like, okay, we need, got into work calls and stuff like that. Let's resume in the evening, right? Couple of hours later, at like 4:30, we just picked up where we left off. And it's like, oh yeah, we hit capacity. And that's within 24 hours. And people were like, initially before that, the conversation was like, oh, I think it'll take a couple of weeks to fill up, hit the quota. Not even 24 hours.
Well, at least this is a start.
Yeah, Canada's been doing a bunch of things. I know there's some companies that I've talked to in Canada that they have fast passes to work permits up there so they can go work with their U.S. company remotely in Canada. Canada's trying to get this talent in. So the U.S. needs to figure it out.
Yep, for sure.
Another thing I liked in the proposed amendments, which actually I think we should talk about it just a little bit so that folks reading it can understand it better, because there was some confusion when people read it, is the extension from October to April of the next year for the gap.
So right now, the current H-1B lottery system, I think 2020 was the first year that it was used with this online pre-registration. It used to be filing the whole cap case. So you get selected and you have a 90-day filing window. And, people have their STEM OPT or their OPT expiring, and they can qualify for cap gap if they file a change of status petition prior to the expiration of their OPT. So they can continue working until September 30th, which is the end of the fiscal year. So a couple issues with that. One, you have cases, even with the old lottery system and the new system, that went beyond September 30th. The processing times take a long time. Premiums available, but during the Trump administration, they would shut it down sometimes. Now, even more so with these second lotteries, maybe a third lottery. We saw that in 2021. You're getting to people who can't file their petition, but they would have qualified for cap gap if they got selected in the first lottery. But because they were in the second lottery, they don't qualify. It's after September 30th, right? And so they can't use cap gap. So what they're proposing is, okay, we're going to do this until April. Yeah, so they'll let you take it. And they said between fiscal year 2016 and fiscal year 2022, approximately 99% of change of status petitions from F1 to H1B were adjudicated by April 1st. So, look, there's outliers there, but letting someone take that cap gap until April is going to be helpful. They don't have to apply for premium.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's also another issue where like folks who graduate out in the spring term, if they get the H-1B lottery, they effectively have to wait all the way until the next year for it to start. So this might be one of those cases where this is useful as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so they'll be able to get that OPT. And if, like I said, for those that have that OPT expiring, just the big thing I always remind people is it's not the selection in the lottery. You still got to file the petition to qualify for cap gap.
Okay. We're moving on to like one of the other big changes is the concept of a specialty occupation with this new change. And I know that's probably something a lot of our listeners would be really interested in knowing, because there seems to be a new definition on how the idea of a specialty occupation is going to be tied to your qualifications and how that changes with this possibly new format. So, would you happen to have some thoughts on that?
So I think one of the biggest things people take issue with is that they are going to get rid of this general degree concept. So specialty occupation is a position that requires a degree in a specific field. And,
sure.
So what USCIS is saying is that when you talk about, okay, this position requires a degree in business or this position is engineering, right? They're going to say, okay, that's too general. And we've seen that RFE for years that, okay, if somebody says the position requires a degree in engineering, USCIS is like, well, there's 55 fields of engineering. That's not specific enough. And it's kind of asinine because no one is going to a software position and taking their mechanical engineering degree with no background in computers.
Yeah.
Or, no one's going to go work with nuclear engineering and just take a software engineering degree, right? There obviously is a correlation, but we've seen that, there's like 55 fields. So they're going to be focusing more on making sure you are more specific, but there's some good, right? There is some good with it. they're going to codify that normally means normally. So, it's a position that normally requires a degree in a specific field. And during the Trump administration, we would see cases where, like, well, sure, this position typically requires a degree or normally requires a degree, but not always requires a degree. And so we'll deny it for specialty occupation. And there's a lot of courts that have said no. Like, normally means typically, normally means most of the time, not always. So they are looking to bring that back into that normally means common, not always.
I'm tempted to start a podcast that just says the word normally because the importance that it has in immigration law, like how you stated that seems crazy.
Yeah, it's just always weird. We'd see those cases and they're like, well, sure, maybe this field requires a degree 80% of the time, according to our data, but that's not always. It doesn't always require a degree. So maybe you don't require one. So little nuance changes there, kind of getting rid of that general, I think it's going to be interesting because let's say you're talking about someone with a human resources manager and okay, that requires a degree in business. And okay, like you've got to have that business acumen and all that. And that makes sense, right? From a logic standpoint. But now USCIS is going to turn around and say, well, that's not specific enough. That's where I think we could see some headaches. I think a lot of the engineering, that's just drafting, right? We're just going to make sure we're putting in specific fields of engineering and not just engineering.
Okay.
But I think there are positions that do fit with more of a generalized degree, but you would still need that degree to do the job.
So I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of this. I'm just being pessimistic about USCIS in general or about the way they write stuff. I just feel as if this is going to result in a huge drastic increase in RFEs.
Oh, yeah.
Just because of the fact that now they'll be like, oh, okay, you've got a particular engineering degree, but you're actually supporting your process in some other engineering, right? Just for starters. And I also think this is going to act as a kryptonite towards that proposed role for entrepreneurs starting their own company. For example, if you've got a great idea and it's nothing to do with the field of study that you studied in, right? Essentially, this role is killing that right there. How are you going to get an H1B specialty because you don't have a degree for that?
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that, because right now you've got to show the position's a specialty occupation and you qualify for it. Pretty hand in hand, but I hadn't really thought about it with the entrepreneur side of it. If I have a computer science background, I'm like, you know what? I've got this really great idea in mechanical engineering. What, do I not qualify for it? Maybe I've been doing it for years or very knowledgeable in it.
Yep.
And it's probably another aspect would be like folks who are trying to like change careers or something. Like for the most part, a lot of software engineering, even today, are folks who don't have a background in computer science. Like it's pretty much an accepted fact. That's the reason why there's so much of demand for the skills. And then again, so let's say you have somebody who's worked 10 years in the software industry, but their background is like in mechanical engineering. Oh, how does that qualify as a specialty job?
And I think it's one of the flaws where we haven't seen the modernization. My first job out of college was IT recruiting for a company that supported hospitals. I was very bad at it. But that was my first job. And the hospitals would focus on is certificates and not education. And I know now, IT is more experience-based. It's more certificate-based than it is formal education. And so, when we have H1B, and this is an issue eventually Congress needs to take up, is it's so degree-focused that it's not really catching on with the modern requirements. It's one of the issues nurses have, right? It's hard for nurses to get H1Bs because most nurses don't require, to get a nursing license, you don't have to have a bachelor's degree. You can have an associate's degree. That doesn't make it not a specialty occupation, in my opinion, but they don't get H1Bs because it could be an associate's degree.
So I actually went down a rabbit hole when this thing came out and I looked at it and it says, the INA, the specialty occupation definition, there's no requirement in that actually requires that specialized studies must be directly related to the position.
Oh, so the INA clearly states that you're saying a specialty occupation does not mean like a specialized degree.
It does not mean that your specialized studies does not directly need to relate to the position. And so this is a direct contradiction to that.
And more to your point about increasing RFEs, one of the arguments we started pushing a lot during the Trump administration when we saw a lot of denials on specialty occupation is that, we're talking about high-skilled individuals applying for these visas, and USCIS officers don't have to have a degree, let alone a degree in that field. And one of the lines we started using is, at the time, the director of operations, Donald Neufeld, didn't have a degree. And so we would throw in this line like, hey, you're not really qualified to opine on this. USCIS officers aren't required to have a degree, let alone a degree in this field. See, for example, Donald Neufeld doesn't have a degree and he runs operations.
That's like Steven's reverse Uno movement.
Yeah, so I used the language today because, we had an evaluation and I was like, hey, here's a professor. They're giving their authority on it. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's the thing. We deal with these officers and look, my major in college was leadership studies. I had class with athletes, okay? And I couldn't really opine on an engineer or a software developer looking at the job duties, right? On, okay, does this require a degree or not? And that's what we're asking USCIS officers to do is look at this. They don't know what they're talking about, and that's fine. There's so many fields.
Yeah, but you don't need to know everything about everything, right? I mean, but at least I think accepting that is the first step, right? And we spoke about it in our episode with John. Like, if you give us qualifications about a rocket scientist, Sanjay and I, right? Even though we've got engineering degrees, we would be none the wiser because it's not our field of work. And that's perfectly okay admitting it, right? But you're having someone, the same person, decide whether a professor's extraordinary, if a research patent is extraordinary, if a rocket scientist is extraordinary. That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I think this is where some of the other safeguards of the H-1B program come in. Companies aren't going to be hiring and paying the wages of someone that doesn't qualify for a position. And let's say they aren't, because there's bad companies out there. We know that. There are avenues, for DOL to go after them if they're not paying the wages and they're not taking care of the employee they're supposed to. So I think if you allow a little bit more trust to these employers with saying, look, we require a degree for this position. Okay, great. And if you decide, okay, well, I've hired this guy and I said he requires a degree and, he's just filing papers in our mailroom and I'm not actually paying him what I said I was going to pay for him, that's when DOL can step in.
Yeah. So when you say safeguards, Stephen, does that mean we have a lot more site visits and stuff like that? FDNS visits and stuff?
So we'll see. So that's actually one of my least favorite parts of this regulation is the FDNS, right? So the Fraud Detection and National Security Directorate, they do a lot of these site visits. They come to clients. They come to work sites. I've had them go to people's homes when they are working at people's homes. They want to ask a lot of questions. And then to the companies, they go well outside the scope of that H-1B employee bill. Oh, we want the payroll records of all your employees and we want, all this stuff. And it's well outside the scope. And right now, we kind of have this trump card of saying, no, we're not going to do this. FDNS is a voluntary program. We can decline to respond, and you're just supposed to go with what's publicly available. And I do that all the time. My clients don't want to waste their time answering this 20-question survey when it's all in the H-1B anyway. But this proposed regulation is going to make FDNS mandatory. They're going to create disincentives for not participating, and whether that's notice of intent to revoke. And here's the issue with FDNS. A lot of times the information they're asking for is innocuous. It's not that bad. I have seen them, though, misrepresent things that are sent to them. I've seen them omit things. I've seen them not really accurately portray things, because what you have are these FDNS officers that are contractors. They take some field notes. They send it to the USCIS officer. The USCIS officer reviews it and then sends a notice of intent to revoke or whatever. So you're playing a big game of telephone. I mean, I had one last week where they said no one was at the office, and the client sent me something saying, well, we sent a letter to the FDNS officer the next day saying, hey, we had closed our office because of bad weather. We're available to talk. Just let us know. And that was nowhere in the notes from USCIS.
Oh.
So I don't like FDNS. They do things like that. And then we've seen it come up at the adjustment of status where they said, hey, a couple years ago, we did a site visit and your employer said this, now you're saying that. What's the difference here? So my word of advice, be nice to them, but you can't decline to respond to the FDNS officers. And for now, this proposed regulation.
This was another thing I was not a huge fan of.
I don't like this one bit. I do know some attorneys that are challenging the authority of FDNS to even exist. So they kind of like it. I guess it gives them more of a litigation option on that.
It was funny you say, because I think the first time I was made aware of the fact that giving your information to the FDNS site visit was voluntary was when John was on one of our episodes.
Yeah, that's what I figured. This is like John's pet project, and he and I have been talking about this for years. We had one. He and I were working on one together out of Dallas, and I dealt with this USCIS officer before. And I told her, okay, you don't have authority. And she said, well, here's my authority. And she gave me a citation. I was like, dang, maybe she's right. Maybe I'm wrong. And then I looked, it was for I-140 religious workers. And so I sent it back saying, no, you're wrong. She's like, well, Congress wants us to do this. And I responded back, okay, Congress can send a subpoena. But John had her working on together and tells her, no, we're not going to do it. She's like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, we're not going to do it. And she sends an administrative subpoena and, saying you need to do it, on this time. John sends her the nice email about, well, can't believe, this is voluntary and you're going to send a subpoena that tends to go against it. Are you sure? She said, yeah, we responded to the subpoena. He said, okay, let me know which federal court you're going to move to enforce it in. We haven't heard from her. This was like 2 years ago. We haven't heard from her yet about enforcing her subpoena. So yes, FDNS, they're bullies, right? They're going to try all their tactics and try to bully you into working with them, but you don't have to.
It's like a game of poker, right? If you don't call their bluff and raise the stakes, you fold.
Yeah, and for my clients, I tell them, let me handle it because I'm a little bit removed. It's not my company, so I could just be that mediator between you and them and say, no, as the attorney, I'm not telling my client to do this. Here's our opinion. What are they going to do to me? Nothing.
So you and John play good cop, bad cop, huh?
Yeah, so he and I enjoy FDNS just because they think they can do more and they think they can bully, and a lot of people don't push back. And so when they finally get a little pushback, they don't like it.
They get scared. That's interesting. Yeah, I miss John. We should call and tell him we spoke about him a lot in this episode.
So, yeah, John was a mentor for me on a lot of this stuff, and he's got some great ideas, and he and I have worked together for years on different projects.
Nice. Is it just me, or are the immigration lawyers like a very tight-knit, small community?
I think so. And I think, from my perspective, there's work, right? Everybody's going to need some help. And I would rather someone get the best help than must go through me, right? You know what I'm saying? If there's a client who's got an issue and I know John or Jesse Bless, Brad Bettis, they're litigating that issue, and I've worked with them before and I trust them, I'd rather them go talk to someone who's currently working on that issue than me saying, okay, cool, like let me do it and come up with something. Because to me, it's more about making sure the person gets the right help. And if somebody's doing it already, okay, go work with that.
Nice.
But yeah, it does feel like a small community, especially in the employment-based side. I think people know who works with each other and all.
Yeah. And speaking of, employment-based immigration, the other topic we were thinking about, like having a brief discussion, was on the EAD card recommendation by, there's like this group in the White House, an advisory group that has done it.
Yeah, I cannot remember their abbreviation. It's like the Asian Pacific.
It's the PACAANHPI.
Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. It's a group that, WHIAANHPI, they are working on different matters to advise the White House on issues for Asian Americans, Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders community. And there have been members of that group that are very strong advocates for especially the Indian backlog community, and I've been trying to put some things forward. Now, the big thing to keep in mind is this is an advisory group. They can't make policy, they can't make regulations, they can't make law, but what they're doing is we're going to talk about these things and, okay, we're going to make a proposal to the White House that hey, we should do this. So the EAD and AP card for people that have been with an I-140 for what I think it was 5 years.
Yep.
Giving them a work permit and the advanced parole, that was their recommendation. And so now it would be up to the Biden administration to go through the Department of Homeland Security and maybe Department of State to propose a regulation to enact that.
Okay.
But, I think it's good that they're putting it forward at least and trying to move the ball forward, especially when Congress is about as useless as it comes.
Yeah.
So, Stephen, if you had to like give us some odds, what are the odds you think that something like this will get through?
Look, I'm super hopeful. Anything to make things easier. It's just, I don't have a good feel for the current administration. This administration is very big pro-immigrant, and then you see some low-hanging fruit like this, and they're not willing to take action. Their focuses are elsewhere, it seems like.
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely a good point. I think although there's a pretty large group of people that are affected by this system, specifically employment-based immigration, mostly folks from India, I still think that there's not a lot of, media attention or voice around their issues. And that could be one of the things, I don't know, at least that's me being a little bit more optimistic.
It's one thing contributing to this is that the congressmen or the folks, whoever it is who's taking the final decision, right? They don't know the intricacies of the H1B system.
Yeah.
Like I have actually seen, it's called C-SPAN, right? I've actually seen proceedings where they need people to cast their vote on passing a particular act or a law or a motion or something like that, right? And a couple of questions or a couple of comments they make to support the reason why they're denying it. Everyone's got like a minute to speak or something, right? And when I hear it, I'm like, they just don't know. They don't understand the intricacies, because we know it because they're living and breathing it, right? But they don't. They've got a holistic view. They see that if we're getting people here on visas, we've got Indians on visas. That's it. They don't know how specific it is. Companies have to do their due diligence. You can't steal someone else's job. No company will willingly go through these steps when they can hire someone, a citizen.
Locally. Yeah.
They just don't get that part.
And I think there's misconceptions too about the harm that the backlog community is facing. I think, the Improve the Dream organization has done a really good job getting their voices heard about the age out children. But, outside of the age out children, a lot of the congressmen are saying, okay, we're talking about people that are high skilled. They're getting paid well. What's the deal? And they're not looking at the harms that, you guys can't just freely change your job tomorrow. It's not easy to do that. And, the amount of times I think the part with, especially the advanced parole, is the amount of times we've talked to people who are like, I can't travel and risk a 221G, so I'm going to skip my father's funeral. Or, not go to my brother's wedding because I can't get visa appointments. And that's just atrocious. I mean, you're having people missing major life events for this. And, we're talking about advanced parole. We're talking about travel authorization for people that have a green card waiting, right? We just need their priority date to become current. It's not like they're freshly here and they've never been vetted. We're talking about people that have been here for years. The advanced parole and the EAD, let's make it a little easier for people to start companies. Or look, I don't like my employer. They're kind of, I've talked to people, their employers treating them poorly. Well, what are they going to do? They have to go get somebody else to sponsor them. So they feel stuck. And it's not fair. It's not right. I hope, we try to do something, especially, like I said, the advanced parole especially, and then age out children. Like those two things, I think, solve a lot of the issues.
I think we need to do like an episode where we just lay out these facts, a dummy's guide to H1B immigration or something like that.
It's funny you mentioned that, and I told you guys when we first talked, being in Texas, right? We get conservatives and all immigrants and all this. Then when you talk about what people are going through, what companies are going through, and then the green card backlog for Indian nationals, and they're just, oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Exactly.
Everybody's do things the right way. And when we're talking employment base for India, we're talking 2011, you would have had to start the process.
Yeah.
For Mexico family base, you would have had to start before 9/11. I mean, people don't realize how broken the system is because our laws haven't changed since the 60s.
So when a regular person does not know about it or an employer does not know about it, I don't blame them, right? Because it's not something that's directly affecting them. We have a very blinkered approach to life, I feel. If it's something that doesn't directly affect you, we tend to not give anything more than a cursory glance towards it. What bothers me is when we've got congressmen and congresswomen who are at the position where they make laws that impact us. They are duty bound to understand it, right? Because we pay taxes too.
I think the other side of it is not only do they not know, but they don't realize that one side of immigration doesn't always correlate to the other. Republicans right now, they aren't going to do anything on employment-based immigration until, we got to lock down the border and stop, stop the invasion and all that, right? That's the rhetoric. And in the meantime, you're talking about, you got people that are, the EAGLE Act was reproposed this year, and it's, Republicans just aren't going to hear it, because they're not going to do anything on immigration until we lock down the border, right? And, it doesn't have to be both things at once.
The only specialty occupation that's going to be looked upon favorably is if you're an architect or a civil engineer or something like that, just to help them with the wall.
Yes.
Secure the border.
Secure the border.
Yeah, they'll take care of that. It's always interesting because the way I always explain it is, when we talk about the employment-based green card side, EB2, EB3, they've done a labor test. There's not a U.S. worker ready, willing, and able. EB1, we have extraordinary or they're multinational executives and managers. Yeah. EB5 obviously is EB5, but it's not like any of this is limiting anything else, right? It's been tested or they're super high skilled. So, maybe the caps made sense in the 60s. It doesn't make sense in 2023.
Yeah.
So in that proposed H1B amendments, something that I saw floating around was that remote work is acceptable now?
Yeah, that's the one good thing. They've been kind of pro remote work now, especially post 2020. We've seen it a lot more, obviously with COVID. And we've not had any issues. People working completely from home or, completely away from, they're not at a client site physically or they're not at their employer physically. And that's good. I mean, that's good to see that at least some levels they are keeping up with it.
It's just like they have one good pill, then they've got another one that acts as a poison pill or a kryptonite for the other one, right? Like I saw one that they just kind of snuck it in there, which I think will probably impact IT firms a lot, especially the consulting firms. I read that now an H1B worker staffed at a third-party location, the requirements to fill that position need to be, whether it's a specialty occupation or not, that responsibility falls on the third party, not the employing organization at all.
Yeah, so I think, in this USCIS is they're going to look at that third party as well. And I think there could be some good and bad. And what they're trying to prevent is, the hypothetical I used when I was talking about it in our office, I own a janitorial service and say, all my janitors require a degree in engineering. Well, that's not true, but, that's one of the prongs of specialty occupation is what do I require? And so I can't just make up a requirement, right? And so if I'm placing at a third party, they're going to look at what that third party requires. And I think there's some good and bad. If you're placed at an end client, I think, maybe that end client is squared away and they're posting their job requirements with degrees. But I could see USCIS getting a wild hand and saying, they just say you need to know this software and this program and this tool. They don't say anything about degrees anywhere. Yeah. It's not a specialty occupation. So I could see, like, Facebook's not going to hire someone without a degree, right? But if they don't mention that on their website, what's USCIS going to be looking to when they make that decision?
But the way I read it, the first thing that came to my head was all those IT consultancies that have all these third-party placements and stuff. I see this hitting them big time. Because not a lot of these third-party companies are willing to say, hey, you know what, take care of the documentation in order to prove this is specialty or communicate with USCIS back and forth. Because essentially one of the reasons why they have a middleman in place. So something like this, I feel, will probably hit them quite a lot.
Yeah, I think so. I think we saw it pop up a little bit with the Trump administration trying this, right? Now we're seeing it again. I always tried to cite to contracts. And, everybody, when they contract with these consulting firms, has language in there like, you are responsible to ensure that your employees are qualified for the position. And so that's what I would kind of point towards. It's like, hey, they're not going to put an unqualified individual in. But certainly on the specialty occupation side, especially, when some of the litigation that came out in 2020 ended, that they don't have to require all the end client letters and everything. Companies might not be willing to get back into the groove of doing end client letters.
And I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier, like the idea of, something directly affecting us that we might not know. And one of those things is stateside visa renewals, right, Rahul?
Yes. A big win. It's a big step in the right direction.
For now, a little bit. Hopefully this pilot program grows.
I see a fellow pessimist in you, Stephen.
Yeah, 20,000 is not a big pilot program. I think it'll be all in the implementation.
I think going by Canada will probably get done in 2 days.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, prior to 9/11, we had stateside visa renewal. You send in your passport to the Department of State, you renew your passport. And that's great, right? We don't have the risks of getting stuck abroad with a 221G forever. We'll kind of clear it up now. And 9/11 happens. They get rid of it because Department of State doesn't have the stateside ability to do biometrics and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they're finally trying to bring it back, which is great. The issue is that this pilot program, which is hopefully starting in January, but was supposed to start last summer and then this summer, but it's supposedly starting in January 2024, right, is only going to be 20,000 people. And I get it. They've got to test it, see how things go. And hopefully they expand the pilot program more so. But right now, we're going to get something in the Federal Register next month here in December, and hopefully they give more details. But I think it's going to be extensions of like H1Bs only. Like it doesn't include the articles I saw. It didn't mention spouses. It didn't mention children. So hopefully they hurry up and expand the program after the pilot works out.
Yep. And the thing is, even if it's a little more expensive than
it's not going to be as expensive as taking a flight ticket to India.
Right. Like taking the flight and risking having to stay there.
Even if the stamping was for like $3,000, I'll probably consider paying it.
Well, for me, something like that, I'll definitely do it for the certainty, right? Like I know that I can have it back and I don't need to freak out about my travel plans, because I know for a fact personally, like these family friends of ours and their children, both who are working in the US, were getting married in India, and they literally had to plan their wedding date around the date of their visa appointments, for their H1B stamping, because it's literally 2 weeks before the wedding. Their relatives were informed, hey, the wedding's today because we finally got a visa slot for their interview, and now we know what we can do about it.
God forbid you get stuck with a 221G, because then it just sits in a black hole, and it could be 3 weeks, it could be 3 months, it could be longer. So I agree. Get the certainty of getting the visa.
Also, with those fraud findings, what we learned from John's episode, we don't even know about it unless we go. And they look at it and they just say, oh, we're not renewing it, your visa is rejected. And you're stuck in a different country without resources.
Yeah,
go figure it out. And I know John's talking about getting some workarounds on it, but there's the doctrine of consular non-reviewability suing the consulates. Thankfully these decisions are ultimately being made by DHS, which is makes it a little bit of a workaround. But you don't want to be stuck in the consulate with, oh, what great, now I am inadmissible and I can't come back.
Wow.
And I had no clue. And even worse, I don't know why, because all they did was check the box saying inadmissible under 212A6CI. I have no clue why I have a fraud finding. I just apparently have one.
Wow. Hopefully the stateside stuff actually becomes a success. I don't know how good government implementations have been regarding this sort of stuff before, so fingers crossed on that.
Yeah, hopefully it goes smooth, and hopefully they expand it soon. Because I think Rahul's right. I think people will pay to get that certainty and try to clear things up before they travel rather than after.
It's just another source of unaccounted funds for your CIS, like the premium processing fees.
All that money they get just to do something that they're supposed to do pretty quickly as it is, right?
They're building out that private army with the FDNS. That's what John told us.
It's where all that $500 goes to every new petition.
Yeah,
I know, Stephen, like you have a hard stop pretty soon, so we'll probably wrap this up. Any closing thoughts?
No, yeah. So I'm going to be working here in the next, hopefully, couple of weeks here on a comment to the H1B. If folks have ideas on their thoughts, feel free reach out to Rahul and Sanjay. Happy to talk with them and include some of those ideas, or reach out to me. Because I think there's things I see and there's things I don't see because it doesn't impact me directly. So I always like to hear. Now, the big thing is your comments have to be related to the regulation. And that doesn't mean you can't maybe advocate for things, but we aren't going to get rid of the green card backlog in this, with comments to this regulation. And they're just gonna, say it's irrelevant.
That hopeful, optimistic person saying, "Yeah, I hate this whole system. Can you just remove this and just give me green cards on arrival?"
Great, we're happy with that. But yeah, there's a lot of folks on social media that try to provide some updates, and I know I do and our team does, but hopefully we can get some positive news here soon.
Nice. Yeah. And thank you so much once again for spending this time and, joining us on this episode.
Yeah, we hope you come back, Stephen.
I will. Yeah, definitely. It's been fun, and I enjoyed talking with you guys, and hopefully we'll come up with another topic here next time and talk about it.
And
sure.
I don't think we're ever going to run out of immigration topics.
No, it's fun. It's fun. It's funny because a guy that I worked with, he'd left for another firm. He and I had kind of talked about something similar, right? We were trying to do some updates on our firm's YouTube channel, and we just kept joking, we're going to do like immigration boys, and we're just going to kind of like bar stool for immigration, and let's just have a drink and talk immigration. Nice. And it never came to fruition. I think that's when COVID started and all, but it's been fun. It's a serious topic, but there's ways to have a little bit of fun. I mean, I know you guys like to get on USCIS. I know I do. And they make it easy sometimes.
No, we don't, Stephen. No, we don't.
Yeah, not you guys in particular, but when they go to celebrate the service of a deputy director who I'm pretty sure committed perjury in a class action lawsuit, I'm happy to make fun of them for it.
For all the government officials listening in, I'm actually wearing my I Love USCIS t-shirt. You guys can't see it right now.
Yeah. These it's definitely not Rahul and Sanjay. They're definitely stage names. They told me ahead of time.
But again, like Sanjay said, thanks for coming in. And you've been someone who's always been very active with whatever we post on Twitter or just with your comments in general. So thank you for that. I know if everyone listening in, we try to make light of this. Immigration by no means is a laughable thing. It's a lot of people have been affected pretty hard. But again, if you're able to laugh at something and feel like it's kind of easy to, accept what you're hearing. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We've always said that we're very accessible to you guys. Send us a note, send us an email, reach out to us on Twitter or Instagram, and then we'll also connect you to Stephen. If you guys have any questions for him, we'll also get him back again.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks again, Stephen.
Y'all take care. Thank you for having me.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Wow. So that was a fun conversation with Stephen.
Right. I think it was good to get someone experienced to weigh in on these. I mean, we've been reading a lot of posts and we've read it ourselves. It was nice to get an expert's opinion on this.
Yeah.
There are some winners and losers in this whole amendment that they've proposed. Definitely steps taken in the right direction. Like I said, USCIS, we always appreciate it when you do take steps in the right direction. I think clamping down on multiple entries, remote work.
Solid win.
Entrepreneurship options for H1B folks. Yep. One thing we didn't talk about is definitions of nonprofit research organizations. These are all definite wins for us on visas. Things that bother me, specialty occupation definition, which I think is very deadly. I have a feeling that they might use this
like the poison pill or something.
Yeah, pretty much for all the good that they've suggested in this, especially the starting a business in your own name and the now that the onus is on a third party to actually define that it's a specialty occupation. And if there are any RFEs, I've read some places that the responsibility will be on them to kind of push that along. Will companies want to take the responsibility? I don't know.
I think maybe there's going to be a lot of litigation around that. Like, firms like Stevens, they might pursue lawsuits to get that out or at least tone it down significantly where it becomes a much more lighter version of what is actually being proposed right now. So maybe let's hope for the best. That's all we can say.
It is nice to see conversation around this.
Yeah.
Because H1B has been there for a while. One pet peeve I had, I really hoped in this, they would probably propose to increase the number of H1B visas every year. Before 9/11, it was, I think, we were more than 100,000.
See, that's the thing. Now I'm going to be curious if this gets enacted, then next year's lottery is going to be pretty interesting to see how many petitions are actually going to go for, an H1B.
I have a feeling 2024 will not be included in this. I think one more year will probably go under the same rules.
Oh, you think?
December 22nd they're closing down comments on December 22nd.
Mm-hmm,
Then we've got it passing through different things, different comments, different updates. I think the earliest we could see this probably be the 2025 lottery. So.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, you're right.
So for folks who are like still kind of hoping on that last shot next year, don't go by this. Keep your backups in place. If you think that, hey, your chances will drastically increase, I have a feeling it's too soon to see this implemented in March or April next year.
And for folks who are planning to graduate soon, I'd say stick it out another semester, because that way, your odds of getting to the new lottery system would be better once this is implemented than before. Let's hope for the best. That's all we can do at this point in time.
Yeah.
And, with the holidays coming up, we're hoping all of our listeners, you have a good time and have a pretty good new year as well.
Yeah. Happy holidays, guys. Thanks for sticking with us for the whole year. And we hope to put out more content for you.
It's almost a year since we started this thing, Rahul.
Yeah, we started last year in December. And we hit 1 year.
So we probably need to have another episode just on that, maybe.
Yeah. I think we'd have one just to recap the year for us. Talk about some of the episodes, a couple of things we learned, a couple of cool folks we met on the podcast. I think we've got some very interesting guests.
Yep.
Some sharing positive stories, some informational, some not so positive. But I think we should have one just to talk about that.
Yeah. All right. That's a wrap, folks. Hoping to catch you soon. And once again, we'd love to have any and all sort of your feedback. Please reach out to us on email, Twitter, Instagram, whatever you feel like. We would definitely be willing to listen and, talk about your feedback. And we want to make this better. And we thank you for listening to us, because, that's why we do this, and hope to catch you soon with another episode.
That's right, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Take care.